In the vast wilds of northern Canada, where the trees grew tall enough to block out the sun and silence reigned like a secret, a young explorer named Elias Thorne stepped off the beaten trail and into the deep unknown. He wasn't searching for gold, or fame, or even peace. Elias was after something rarer, mystery. The locals in the last roadside town had whispered strange things over drinks and low fires. They spoke of shapes moving in the night, too tall to be wolves and too fast to be men. They warned him of haunting howls, not animal, not human. Elias had smiled, thanked them for their concern, and set off with his pack and camera. For 3 days, he trekked across the mossy, pine-blanketed floor of the forest, noting the signs of undisturbed wildlife, the richness of nature untouched by industry. He set up camp beneath a towering cedar, letting the crackling fire keep the shadows at bay. The air was crisp, but clean, tinged with pine and something else. Something faintly musky, like fur after rain. That night, as the moon broke through the tree line, Elias heard it. Not a howl. A breath. He turned, flashlight steady, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. Yet he felt it, eyes watching. On the 4th morning, his path curved toward a stream, winding through rocks and fallen logs. He crouched to fill his canteen and looked up just in time to catch a glimpse of movement across the water. A shadow, low and smooth. He froze. The shape didn't vanish like prey, it paused, turned its head, and looked at him. Elias blinked, his breath catching. There, perched on a mossy stone across the stream, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. She was, almost human. Her skin was smooth, lightly bronzed from sun and wildness. Long, silver-gray hair tumbled over her shoulders, untamed and wild. But it wasn't just hair. Ears, furry, lupin, rose from her head, twitching slightly. Her eyes were a piercing golden yellow, reflecting the light even in daytime. She had a tail, a thick, expressive thing that swayed behind her, brushing the moss with each small movement. Her body was strikingly feminine, hips generous, chest full, waist soft and sculpted. She stood on bare feet, toes slightly clawed but light on the forest floor. She wore no clothing, only what nature gave, patches of fur, subtle and natural, tracing along her limbs and sides like accents of her wild blood. Elias slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a protein bar, blueberry, sweet, and crinkled in its shiny wrapper. He unwrapped it with exaggerated care and laid it on the stone beside him before backing away. The creature, the woman, watched him silently. No sound escaped her, but her head tilted with curiosity. She stepped forward, fluidly, her body moving with a quiet grace that made Elias's heart race. She sniffed the air, then the food, then picked it up and retreated slightly to a log, crouching like an animal and nibbling at the snack with delicate fingers. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Instead, he watched. She stayed for 10 minutes, occasionally glancing up at him with unreadable eyes. Then, with a final lick of the wrapper, she vanished into the undergrowth. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The memory of her, the sharpness of her gaze, the curve of her thighs, the way her tail flicked when she tasted the food, lingered in his mind like an echo. He told himself it was fascination. Discovery. Curiosity. But it was more. He was hooked. The next day, he returned to the same stream. This time he brought more, a small pouch of dried meat, a half apple, a thermos of warm broth. He placed them on a flat rock and stepped back again. She returned. She didn't run this time. She approached with confidence, or caution veiled as confidence. Her body moved like a dancer's, sensual but never deliberate. Her nose twitched. She took the food, watching him closely. This time, she sat on her haunches to eat, tail curled around her thigh. Elias dared to sit too, several feet away, his camera forgotten. She never spoke. But her eyes spoke enough. Curious, unblinking, almost testing him. A subtle communication began. One day, he brought an offering. She accepted. The next, she left him a stone, smoothed by the river. Then a feather. Then a strange, braided vine, tied like a ring. By the seventh day, she waited for him at the stream. No longer hiding. No longer a mystery in the trees. She began approaching closer. Close enough that he could see the texture of her fur patches. The ridges of muscle beneath her soft skin. The faint rise and fall of her breath. He didn't dare touch her. Not yet. But one evening, when he laid out a piece of smoked salmon, she came right to him. She leaned down, took it from his hand, and just for a moment, let her fingers brush his. They were warm. And real. That night, in his tent, Elias lay awake. The heat from her touch still clung to his skin. Her scent, forest and fur and faint sweetness, still lingered in his lungs. He knew something unspoken had passed between them. On the 10th day, he followed her. She appeared by his camp and beckoned with a tilt of her head. He trailed her through dense trees and sun-dappled clearings, over mossy stones and beneath fallen trunks. She didn't look back often, but when she did, her golden eyes seemed to challenge him. Deeper and deeper into the woods they went until the forest opened into a hidden glade, filled with wildflowers and warm light. A den, perhaps hers, made of woven sticks, leaves, and bone. She sat on a rock and watched him. Her legs crossed, posture relaxed but poised. Her tail curled over one side of her hip, framing her body in a way Elias couldn't ignore. Still, no words. Just those wild eyes. He sat too, offering nothing. Just presence. A test, perhaps. And he passed. She crawled forward. Slowly. Carefully. And stopped just inches away. Their faces close, breaths mingling. Her gaze was fierce. Not angry. Not frightened. But something else. Curious. Possessive. Elias didn't move. Then she sniffed him. Not just his hand this time. His neck, his chest, his cheek. Marking him, maybe. Then she stood, circled him once, and disappeared into the trees again. But this time, it wasn't a retreat. It was an invitation. The forest had grown quieter since their meeting. Elias felt it in the air, a shift. The silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was awareness. The trees watched. The moss listened. The streams whispered things only the heart could hear. Each day, the she-wolf appeared again. Never at random, always precise, always waiting. As if she knew his path before he chose it. Her presence had become part of the forest, and now, part of him. She never spoke. Yet the silence between them grew heavy with unspoken things. Curiosity. Hunger. Recognition. Elias wasn't sure if he was falling for her or into her, like a dream that refused to fade after waking. He began to learn her language. The tilt of her head. The low flick of her tail. The way she breathed when close, lips slightly parted but never forming words. Her fingers grazed objects with the delicacy of someone unused to touching. But when she moved, her body spoke fluently. Hips swaying with a natural sensuality, legs folding like a feline's, spine arching in moments of alertness or stillness. On the 12th day, she brought him something, a rabbit, freshly killed. She laid it near his fire without flinching, her nose twitching. Elias offered his own food in return, but she declined. Instead, she sat. Not near him, but not far either. They shared the firelight that night, with only the crackling of pine needles to mark time. Elias sipped his broth, glancing over at her. She sat cross-legged, back straight, tail curling slowly around her thigh, and for the first time, her eyes didn't wander. They locked onto his. A slow, Silent connection passed between them, no different than a wolf pack's nonverbal unity. A pact of trust. When he went to sleep, she didn't leave. She lay near the edge of the firelight, curled into herself like a creature of both instinct and restraint. Elias dared not reach out. He simply watched, letting her presence carry him into dreams. Days passed. Their rituals deepened. She led him to clearings where deer grazed undisturbed, to waterfalls hidden beneath caves of stone and moss, to places untouched by map or memory. Sometimes, she let him walk beside her. Other times, she dashed ahead, then circled back, playful, coy. Elias began sketching her in his notebook. Not with a hunter's eye, but a reverent one. He wanted to remember the exact shape of her silhouette against the sun, the way her silver hair caught light like water, the small twitch of her wolf ears when listening. But more than that, he wanted to understand her. One afternoon, as they sat near a hot spring, he extended a hand. Not to feed, not to trade, simply to touch. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in rejection, but in curiosity. She leaned in, brushing her cheek against his palm like a feline marking territory. Her skin was warm, softer than he imagined. Fur lined the edge of her jaw, delicate and fine like down. Elias barely breathed. She moved closer. Her tail flicked behind her, slow, deliberate. She brought her hand up, mirroring his motion, and placed it on his chest. Just above his heart. Her fingers rested there, firm but gentle, like testing a rhythm. Then she looked up, and in her gaze, Elias felt everything. Possession. Affection. A warning. She wasn't his. But he was hers. That night, thunder rolled through the forest. Elias awoke to rain drumming against the canvas of his tent. He unzipped the flap and saw her, standing just outside, soaked, hair clinging to her skin, tail drooping with the weight of the storm. She didn't ask. She entered. The space was small, barely enough for one person comfortably. But she folded herself beside him without hesitation, her wet skin cooling the air around them. He handed her a blanket. She took it, wrapping only part of herself, leaving her back bare. Drops rolled down her shoulders, following the gentle dip of her spine. Neither spoke. Elias lay beside her, their bodies not quite touching, but every breath felt closer. The tent filled with the scent of earth, fur, and woman. He could feel the energy between them, quiet, raw, coiled like a spring held back only by the limits of their bond. At some point during the night, she reached for his hand. She gripped it tightly. Not in need. In claim. When morning broke, the storm had passed. But the tension hadn't. She didn't leave the tent right away. She stayed, seated beside him, letting the sunlight stream through the nylon and touch her skin. Her silver hair was drying now, forming soft waves. Elias watched the way her ears twitched at the sound of birds, and how her eyes flicked toward him every so often. There was no fear in her anymore. Only decision. That evening, she led him once again through the woods. This time, they went farther than ever. Over steep ridges, through caves damp with mineral scent, and into a basin, a natural bowl surrounded by jagged stone. In the center was a pool, heated by geothermal springs. She stepped into the water without looking back. Elias hesitated. Then followed. The water was warm, fragrant with sulfur and earth. She stood waist deep, watching him as he approached. Her silver hair clung to her back, her tail floating lazily behind. The steam blurred the edges of her body, but not enough to hide the way she moved. He waited closer. She closed the gap. Her fingers ran along his shoulder. Not tracing. Testing. Claiming. Her touch was confident now, not feral, but intimate. She pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath warming his skin. Then she pulled away and climbed out. She didn't dress. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him once, held his gaze, and disappeared into the forest again, leaving behind her scent, her heat, and a heart now fully tied to hers. Elias sat by the fire that night with the sound of wolves echoing in the distance. He didn't know if they were hers. But they were calling. And he was listening. The following days unraveled like a slow dream. The air around Elias seemed different now, denser, charged with something primal. Every time he woke, he expected her to be gone for good, like a figment of the forest vanishing with dawn. Yet she returned. Always just at the edge of sight. Always waiting. And each time, closer. She no longer fled when he approached. No longer watched from the brush. She had become a companion in the wilderness, more spirit than woman, more woman than myth. One morning, Elias found her already at his camp, squatting by the fire pit, her tail curled neatly to the side. She wore what little she always had, soft gray fur covering only the most essential parts, her body otherwise bare to the sun and wind. Her silver hair spilled across her chest, framing her in a way no human could have designed, raw, sensual, effortless. She stood as he approached, her golden eyes searching him. Not for food. Not for gifts. But for something deeper. Recognition. He offered her a scarf, a simple strip of fabric, olive green, from his pack. She sniffed it, then ran it across her skin, testing the scent. Then she tied it around her wrist and sat beside him. That was the first time she let him touch her without hesitation. He ran his fingers through her hair, slow and careful. Her ears twitched but didn't pull away. Her body remained still, but he could feel the heat building beneath her skin, her chest rising slightly, lips parted, her tail brushing his knee once, then again. Elias withdrew, not wanting to push too far. But in her gaze, he saw it, disappointment. She stood and turned her back to him, showing the elegant curve of her spine, the muscles beneath her smooth skin, the slow sway of her tail. She looked over her shoulder once. And vanished. That night, Elias built a stronger fire. The forest felt alive with movement, crackles in the trees, shadows against the sky. The moon hung low and full, pouring silver across the moss and branches. Then he saw her. Crawling low between the trees, eyes fixed on him like a predator. Her body moved in perfect rhythm with the earth, silent, deliberate. She emerged into the light on all fours, only rising to her feet when she was within reach of the fire. She circled him, not touching, not blinking. Just breathing him in. Then she knelt by his side and laid her head on his thigh. Elias froze. The weight of her, the warmth, the scent of her skin, everything surged through him. He placed his hand on her back, gently, and she leaned into it, a low sound rising from her throat, not quite a purr, not a growl, but something between longing and warning. When she looked up, her eyes were half-lidded, soft with something unspoken. Her hand slid up his leg, just to the knee, then paused. Stillness. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then she withdrew and lay beside the fire, curled on her side like a beast at rest. She never asked for more. But she didn't need to. The next morning, he found paw prints circling the camp, not hers. Larger. Wilder. Elias crouched low, inspecting them, feeling a strange surge of protectiveness. Not for himself. For her. She arrived not long after, faster, tenser. Her movements sharper, less fluid. When she saw the tracks, she sniffed them, then growled softly, barely audible. For the first time, Elias saw true animal instinct rise in her. A flicker of something ancient behind her eyes. She paced. Her tail flared. She lowered her body to the earth and licked at the dirt where the tracks crossed her own. He didn't ask. She wouldn't have answered. But he followed her when she took off through the trees. They moved like shadows between trunks, her silver hair flashing in the dark. Elias could barely keep up, but he trusted her pace, her path. She led him to a ridge, where the rocks looked down over a sunken grove, and there, below, two shapes. Wolves. Real ones. Massive, muscular, pacing in circles. They didn't see them above. But she crouched low, tail low, ears flat, and emitted a soft chuff, a warning to herself, or to Elias, he wasn't sure. Then she stood, turned, and pressed against him. Not sexually. Defensively. Her body close to his, shoulder to chest, as if to shield him. Her golden eyes were calm again, but focused, assessing. She wasn't afraid. But she wasn't indifferent either. She was, claiming him again. That night, she slept pressed against his side. No more distance. Her tail curled over his thigh. Her cheek nestled into the crook of his neck. Elias didn't move. He let her set the boundaries, let her decide when touch became too much. But this time, she wanted closeness. Her breath warmed his collarbone. Her hand rested on his stomach, palm flat and still. Her skin was smooth, and her body, though stronger than his, relaxed completely against him. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, slept without fear or doubt. By the 18th day, she led him back to the den. Only now, it had changed. There were symbols etched in the stone, clawed by hand, spirals, slashes, pictographs. Bones arranged in patterns, furs laid out like bedding. Offerings, perhaps. She knelt near a circle of stones and pulled a single item from a bundle of vines, a carved piece of bone, shaped like a fawn. She extended it to him. Elias accepted it with both hands. She moved behind him, reached up, and tied it around his neck with a leather cord. Then she rested her head against his back and exhaled, a deep, slow breath of contentment. He was hers now. Not in words. Not in law. But in bond. And somewhere deep inside, Elias felt something shift in him too. Something ancient. Something feral. And it felt right. The days grew warmer. The air in the deep woods thickened, heavy with the hum of insects and the hush of shifting leaves. Summer had begun to spread its arms across the wilds of Canada, and in the space between tree and stone, something else bloomed, a deeper connection, raw and wordless. Elias stayed near the den now. He'd stopped wandering. There was no need. The forest no longer felt foreign, it felt alive, familiar, even sacred. His tent lay abandoned near the stream. Instead, he slept beneath a canopy of pine and fir, tucked against the body of the silent creature who had claimed his attention, his trust, and now, his instinct. She came to him every night. Not always for touch, not always for heat. Sometimes she would simply lie beside him, her back to his chest, tail flicking lazily across his legs. Other times, she would rest her head on his lap and doze while he ran his hand over her hair. He spoke to her in low murmurs, even though he knew she didn't understand. Or maybe she did, but didn't care for words. What they shared needed none. On the 21st night, the moon was full again. It burned above the forest like a silver eye, casting long shadows across the glade. Elias awoke to find her standing at the edge of the den, staring upward, bathed in that cold celestial light. She looked otherworldly, her silver hair flowing like silk down her back, her fur-trimmed garments hugging her curves. Her ears flicked back when he sat up, but she didn't turn. Her tail swayed in slow, hypnotic arcs. He rose, stepping toward her barefoot. The grass was cool beneath his feet, and the air hummed with something unspoken. When he reached her, she glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were different tonight, brighter, wider. Alive with something he couldn't quite name. She moved. Not away. But toward him. She circled him once, brushing her hand along his arm, down his side. She sniffed his chest, then ran a hand along his jaw. Every movement slow. Intentional. Not uncertain. The moonlight lit her skin in pale silver. Her body looked sculpted by the wild, strong yet soft, bare where it counted, her form exuding a heat that even the night couldn't suppress. She pressed close. This time, she didn't hesitate. She nuzzled her face into his neck, breathing deeply. Her hands found his waist. Her tail curled behind his legs, her ears twitching against his cheek. Elias wrapped his arms around her, steady, reverent. He felt her exhale, not relief, not fatigue. Need. Not aggressive, but undeniable. She pulled back and looked at him with that same golden stare. Not asking. Inviting. Then she turned and walked, slow steps, hips swaying, tail trailing behind her, toward a cluster of firs beneath the trees. She dropped to all fours briefly, crawling forward before rising again into a graceful kneel. Her back straight, her chest rising and falling. She waited. The invitation was clear. Elias stepped into the space with reverence, not hunger. He joined her beneath the moonlight, sitting first, then reaching out slowly. His fingers traced the soft fur along her outer thigh, then her side. Her skin was warm beneath it, flushed. She leaned into his touch, encouraging, not submissive. Their connection now hung heavy in the air. Silent. Potent. She crawled into his lap without a sound, her arms circling his shoulders. Her breath warmed his cheek. Her hair slid down his chest like silk. She explored him again, slowly, curiously, fingertips along his back, nose to his neck, a soft, low sound rising from her throat. Not a word. Not a growl. Something in between, the sound of a tether tightening. The line between human and wild was fading. And neither of them seemed to care. The night became endless. A symphony of touches, breath, warmth, and rhythm. They did not speak. They did not need to. The moon was their witness. The forest held its breath. And two beings, bound by instinct and longing, moved as one beneath the canopy of stars. In the aftermath, there was only quiet. She lay draped across him, her body relaxed, tail still. Her breathing slowed, lips parted faintly, her cheek resting on his chest. Elias held her gently, running his fingers through her damp hair, brushing over her pointed ears. He had never felt more still. More claimed. More understood. The next morning, she was gone. Only the scent of her remained on the firs, and a single gray hair curled on his chest. But he wasn't worried. She would return. And when she did, he would be ready, no longer a stranger in her world. But something else. Something chosen. The forest had changed. Not in sight, the trees still stretched like ancient pillars toward the sky, the rivers still ran cold and clear, and the birds still sang their soft, occasional songs. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. Elias could feel it in his skin. In his blood. Something had taken root in him. Something wild. He no longer felt like a visitor. The moss beneath his feet no longer chilled him. The winds through the trees no longer bit his cheeks. He moved differently now, slower, quieter, his senses attuned to the rhythm of the wild. Because he knew she was always near. Even when unseen, her presence pressed gently against him, like a second heartbeat. On the 26th day, she returned as dusk draped gold over the trees. He was already waiting, not at the stream, not in the den, but in the open glade where wildflowers now bloomed in thick, sweet clusters. She stepped through the ferns without a sound. Her hair was unbound, loose silver strands swaying with each step. The sunlight caught on her skin, painting her in gold and copper. Her body, as always, was wrapped only in soft patches of fur that moved with her, more symbolic now than functional. And her eyes. They no longer searched. They had found. Elias didn't speak. He stood as she approached, offering nothing but himself. She came close. So close that her breath brushed his neck before she pressed her forehead to his chest, the same place she'd rested her hand days ago, where his heartbeat always stuttered around her. He wrapped his arms around her and felt her melt into him. The moment was quiet, profound, and heavy. She had decided. Tonight was not about gifts. Not about touch for comfort or warmth. It was a ritual. The final bond. They moved to the sacred space without words. The forest seemed to breathe for them, rustling leaves, distant howls, the soft crackle of the fire Elias had built earlier in preparation. He lay the furs out carefully, smoothing them, grounding them in the center of the glade beneath the stars. When he turned, she was already unclothed. Her fur garments laid gently beside her, untouched. She stood bare in the firelight, silver hair flowing down her back, her body curvaceous, poised, strong, sensual, and completely still. The flames danced across her skin like living paint, revealing every line, every shadow, every intention. Her wolf ears flicked. Her tail swayed. And she stepped forward, not shy, not hesitant, but with the walk of a creature ready to claim. Elias met her halfway. Their hands found each other, their bodies touched, chest to chest, hip to hip. Her head nestled beneath his chin, her soft hair blanketing his shoulder. She breathed him in, and he breathed her back. Then she pulled him down, gently, onto the furs. They lay there for long minutes, saying nothing, letting breath align. Letting silence settle between heartbeats. Then, she moved. Not with urgency, but with the slow, graceful confidence of something sacred. She straddled him, letting her tail curl low, brushing over his thigh like a velvet whisper. Her hands explored his chest, not in hunger, but in reverence, mapping him, learning him. And he, in turn, let go. Not of control, but of everything else. Everything before this. Everything outside the trees. Everything that wasn't her. The world around them disappeared. There were no stars. No trees. No past. Just the fire, the furs, the scent of skin and pine, and two bodies weaving into one. Her golden eyes never left his. Not once. Every motion was unspoken promise. Every breath was shared. They didn't rush. They didn't speak. They simply existed in motion, two forces no longer apart, no longer unsure. The moment wasn't wild. It was natural. Inevitable. And deeply, deeply human. When the fire burned down to glowing coals, they lay tangled in each other, breathless and still. Her body was draped over his, silver hair fanned across his chest. Her tail curled along his leg, her ears twitching softly even in sleep. Elias held her close, his hands gentle on her back, as though afraid that any sudden movement would break the fragile spell between them. But this wasn't a spell. It was a bond. Permanent. Feral. Sacred. The next morning, sunlight touched her skin as she stirred. She didn't pull away. She stayed nestled into him, eyes half-lidded, arms draped lazily across his stomach. Her breathing was calm, steady. She had never seemed more at peace, nor more utterly wild. Then she rolled onto her back, stretching with slow elegance. Her tail unfurled, brushing the grass, her wolf ears twitching toward the sounds of birds in the trees. She looked at him. Long. Silent. Then she smiled, barely, just a subtle curve at the edge of her lips. A rare expression. An unmistakable one. And then she stood. She beckoned him. And walked. Elias followed. This time, there was no hesitation in either of them. She led him deeper, past trails unseen, through misted clearings and winding ridges, to a cliff edge where the whole valley stretched before them, wild and endless. She stood there, proud and still, hair caught in the wind. He stepped beside her. She didn't look at him. But her hand found his. She squeezed. And in that simple gesture, Elias understood. He hadn't been lost when he entered this forest. He had been summoned.